Yo, 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 what is good, y'all? What is going on? Hope you guys are doing blessed today. Out here for the daily update video to just talk about price action today, get you guys kind of seeing like what we were thinking, what we were looking at. Yeah, so obviously today we called out one position, which was NASDAQ. Pretty much we took two attempts at it. And, the other thing that if you guys were on the live call that we were talking about was NZD/USD, right? So those two plays were pretty much the focus, right? We ended up choosing NASDAQ, right? Obviously, we could see like, NZD/USD has ran pretty much just as far, um, as NAS, right? In terms of like risk to reward wise. So yeah, two really huge potential opportunities. And again, it just comes from seeing like potential areas of manipulation kind of going across the board with dollar. So because we were kind of seeing the potential like of that, like I feel like the whole market kind of went through like a mitigation phase, just now, right? On the dollar side of things. So, we can kind of see with NZD/USD like this huge wick here that was created. We see this, huge impulse, right? Pretty much from all the way down at 0.6015 until we come all the way up to here. That's when we pretty much like, manipulate there on the 4 hour, kind of create this institutional candle and then continue to come down, right? We have, I believe it was like hard up to like the 30-minute here. We can see like, again, price opens right here, shoots all the way up, just above that previous high, right? So that's the kind of stuff I look for, like for potential like motive for what why is this candle happening? Well, the context behind this candle is like again like the high that it took, which was just again really really significant. And like this high we could see has been holding, for how long now? Since for about 11 days, right? So yeah, seeing that high get taken, being created those institutional candles on higher and smaller time frames. And then really what really gave me the opportunity to, see it in the first place was the fact that on the smaller time frame, once we came back into that zone, right, we can see here that price had a really clean Wyckoff distribution. So we can really see like the three drive push that's going on here, right? We can see price like coming out like, above the below the bottom of the range, right? Like this, coming back into, like take out the highs. So we can definitely see though how, the sell side was like very difficult to stay into, right? We can see the liquidity buildups until finally we get like this sweep here, right? And then we start to see price break down. So once price broke down here, that's when we got onto stream, right? Because like we could see here, this is like the news event 8:30, right? So 8:30 went ahead and pushed this to the downside. And then after 8:30, there was pretty much the mitigation phase that played out, right? So we can basically see this being, the what do you call it, the mitigation phase of the mitigation phase, right? Because obviously here we could see in on Monday, that's where we had price take out all those highs. And then, today we end up having price manipulate highs into there, right? Break down, and then from there look for the push to the downside. So that was kind of why we were looking for this position. The main reason why I didn't take it was just as you could see, I just felt like there was a lot of tests to the same areas, right? Like this, I felt like there was a bit too much of a trend line forming there. So I was kind of considering the possibility of price going ahead and, seeing one more drive to maybe take out this piece of internal liquidity here. And then from there, actually see the continuation, which I thought was possible only because when I was using like the correlation of other assets, right? Things like gold, which we could see like, is still kind of collecting that liquidity above. And then we have things like GBP USD as well, which I felt like with GU, GU has been the weaker pair as a whole when it comes to, like dollar pairs because like I would say like the NZD and the USDs have been good. Sorry, the NZDs and the AUDs have been good, and then GBPs have really been like the more bearish of them, right? Kind of seeing like bigger bearish moves, holding bigger bearish structure a little bit better. And yeah, what I was kind of hoping for was that we could actually get this, right? Price to go ahead and poke above there to then come down, which is what I thought we could see. But instead, price just ended up holding up this lower time frame order flow, right? So I think the biggest way to really look at, especially with trendline liquidity, there's a lot of times that price will like, actually respect it when we're seeing like reversal moves like this one, right? We're seeing price like distributing at the top. Why do we tend to see these hold a little bit more? I mean, because on the lower time frame, we can kind of see the order flow that's happening in them, right? Like I feel like if I see order flow basically inside of highs that are like creating a trend line, then in that case, I would, like look at that like as something that could even potentially hold, especially if it's not like across the board. Like I see this type of thing happen a lot in gold specifically, like really bearish or really bullish assets that like, will just hold these lines, but they're also, we could see signs of manipulation, right, inside of this high, right? Signs of manipulation inside of this high, right? Signs of manipulation inside of this high before we're seeing the drop off, right? So if we're seeing the highs that are creating lows and all of them are all showing signs of manipulation inside of them, then we should be wary of potentially price even coming down earlier without actually giving the run on liquidity, right? Because I feel like especially when we see it with like a three drive push, right? Like I like to look at, sorry, not three drives, three wave push where we're going with one, two, and then three. I like to enter a lot when we see third waves after we've had two previous points of manipulation, just like we do with, type threes, right? It works here as well, right? So price will move in those threes, to be honest, a lot of the times, is like seeing that wave play down with multiple pushes. Like typically the third retest back into that will end up being the push, longer. So yeah, I feel like that's why we didn't really get that sweep there, and we could have anticipated that and potentially gone for NZD USD because we could see how different NU is compared to GU, right? Like I feel like NU is so much cleaner because of the way that we were continuously sweeping highs. If we look at GU, right, like we're holding the highs, right? So this wouldn't be the ideal pair for us to go to, right? Even Euro USD, I thought was also extremely clean. Obviously the only issue being that with Euro USD, this was a wick, right? Versus with NZD USD, this was a candle, right? Which was really an important distinction in terms of like, all right, well, why are we choosing this pair over another, right? Because we have the cleaner price action on NU than we would have on EU, right? The only thing that EU I would say really had really cleaner was just the liquidity below, right? I felt like that was really clear and obvious trend line liquidity there, and not only trend line, but also just like wicks, right? That's the biggest thing. It's like when I see things like this versus seeing actual institutional candles, I look at those lows as weak, right? Because whether or not the institutional candles are there kind of determines like how much money is really behind a move, right? Because that's what candles really represent. They represent the volume of a move, right? In a way. So, like again, that's like why like when we see manipulation candles, they're so big and they're mostly body because that's when big money's being really injected, right? So yeah, so that was pretty much NU, right? I would say, definitely a missed opportunity because I think that not only is this a type two, right, but it's also part of a bigger picture type one, right? So the fact that we have both of those, really happening at the same time, this is good to take a shot for this one, right? Like, I think, right? Because again, what we're like, if we look at this as a white cloud schematic with the three drives, but we also look at it as like, okay, price manipulated, it broke structure on the lower time frame, and then we actually came all the way back for the mitigation. That's a textbook type one, right? So it's a type one, but it's also a type two because we do see like how we've been seeing multiple sweeps over time, right? And we also do see how we're inside of a previous point of interest here, right? So we're in the mitigation phase of the mitigation phase, right? That's literally what a type one is. So yeah, overall clean, right? Could have gotten about a 8 pip stop to go down and reach for about 58 pips, right? Which would have been like a 1 to 7 risk to reward, which is crazy, right? And it might even keep going because again, like I think that the reason we've been looking at these so long for sales, right, is because they've been in distribution. Like I don't doubt that all these are in distribution, like with NU, with EU, with GU, like I think that we've been in distribution, right? So yeah, like obviously here we could see GU is like already basically getting to the lows of its distribution, right? Versus like some of these haven't, right? I think EU a little bit less here, but I would say like NU, AU, right? Stuff like that. Like look at where AU is already, right? Like this is where we took our trade last week. All it's doing is just continuously sweeping. It's making it really, really difficult to be in sells versus like actually giving like some real signs of strength. So that's why for me, bigger picture wise, I'm potentially predicting, some big moves here, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. See how it goes. This is why we, obviously leave runners to see if long-term opportunities can play out, but you know, we want to take positions off the table and stuff like that, taking partials multiple times. Like we took partials twice here, right? Sorry. Yeah, we had the entry there, partials there, and partials there. Right. So yeah, just keeping it percentage based is really the most simple thing y'all can do to just go ahead and actually leave positions going. Um, and yeah, I think obviously like with this now, like this could be it, right? Obviously this could have been it, but this could also be it, to be honest. I just think the liquidity building up and building up, it's getting too much. We're gonna dump. And so that's why, with Nasdaq as well, right? That's why we pretty much obviously had our opportunity there too. So what was the thought process here? Well, we can kind of see like, overall, price has been like distributing, reaccumulating, distributing, reaccumulating, distributing, reaccumulating, right after, one right after another, pretty much. And for me, I'm looking at it like now we're actually getting some really nice candles at the top of those, like on the bigger time frame, right? So I feel like when we're here on the 4 hour and stuff, you know, it's kind of like I feel like when we had these sweeps happening before, right? They weren't really as clean until we've actually now started to see like this breakdown, right? And then we can even look at like obviously, even bigger time frame candles. This is what really had me wanting to look at Nasdaq more than anything because we were coming back into the previous highs of that area. We, had this trap candle form here, right? Just barely taking the high of this previous candle over here, right? So we're taking like, the second highest point of last week, right? And then, from there, we were basically looking for opportunities to head to the downside after we saw that up candle close, right? So this is basically the potential of this up candle being an institutional trap candle, right? Because obviously trap candles are also, institutional candles, right? So yeah, this is basically here where we see the sweep of the area we were talking about last time on stream. We didn't take that trade, but we were speaking about that area. And we could see here like price barely swept that. And then, we started to see like the walk down really occur there on NASDAQ, right? And to me, looks like potential signs of distribution here, right? Obviously, like I thought there was some potential for price to reach up one more time into this like order flow area here, right? Because we could see like after price finished the manipulation phase, right? Because what we can really notice is again, the manipulation phase starts where? It starts here, right? This is where price really goes ahead and targets those highs, right? So we're already inside of there, as a whole, right? So price doesn't necessarily need to get into, like this order flow here, because we can see here, this is like where we mitigated. So obviously that could be a potential area of interest for continuations. But, really we see price completely engulf here. I think right now this hit the mitigation phase, and then now we're potentially going for the, continuation phase, right? So seeing that push to the upside, just barely taking that high, being the manipulation phase, right? We break down, we have the impulsive phase, right? And then we could see here, this is the mitigation. And we end up just seeing price barely take this high, right? I was kind of looking and seeing like, can price respect this previous sweep on liquidity? Price ended up just barely taking it before then actually creating the move down. So yeah, that was pretty good with NASDAQ again. Like I think it was pretty clear that we were distributing just based off the price action that was happening on the Monday, right? Like how we barely swept and then just completely engulfed back down. It would make sense to continue to look for those sells, right? Now we can see that NASDAQ didn't take that high, but US 30 did, right? We can see here US 30 had an even cleaner candle that happened than NASDAQ. We could see price just barely swept the high there with the 15-minute candle, right? We could see it's inside of its previous order flow actually, right? Which is like before we actually broke down. And then from there, we see price completely like shift, right? So we actually have like a break of this low that created this high. We broke, we came back, and price just perfectly, dropped off from there, right? So this was a lot cleaner than NASDAQ. NASDAQ just got a lot more closer to, like the highs that it originally made, because we could see here, like this high here, this high is where US 30 made this high, right? It's the same high, right? So like relatively, US 30 actually ran it, right? But then NASDAQ actually held it here, right? So that's really the main difference between the two, right? But the liquidity was taken on actually, if we look at it, yeah, even on S&P here, we also took that high just barely, right? In that move, whereas like NASDAQ actually held it, right? But funny enough, we actually like had closed it right before that happened. So, we closed in the chat and in the live stream, we closed our first entry on NASDAQ right here, right? Price came up, still respected the high, right? But on US 30 and, S&P, right, ended up taking it on that same high. But we weren't even in the trade at that time. And then price reacted. And then we were trying to see like, okay, can we see this, continuation push down from there? Because we actually did end up getting the reaction, right? So yeah, it was pretty interesting to see, like that, that ended up really being the right pair to choose, I would say, out of any of them, because, this one didn't actually give that sweep, right? Which is good, for us, right? Because we got to essentially, either way, I feel like we definitely would have took an entry on this area, right? Like let's say even if it did take the high, I probably still would have taken that entry. But the biggest thing I liked was like, for this one versus the other one was that clear equal low liquidity to target. Um, and then yeah, like for me, I think that if this daily candle is truly a trap candle, right, which we could see like price basically came all the way down, bounced, right, created this huge trap move over those 2 days, right? And then, if we end up now seeing price actually head to the downside and engulf below this level here, well, maybe this can end up being a big move that can clean up some lows before we actually go ahead and, head to the upside, right? And again, like one thing I've been talking about is like we have this we still have these gaps here, like we have this gap right here, that never got filled ever, right? So like, and this is the low of the distribution here. So not only do we have the low of a potential distro, right? But right below it, we have a potential gap, right? So I don't know, like that's kind of like best case scenario. Like I would love to get entries down here for buys. I just haven't really felt confident like to call out buys during this time. Just because of like again, like whenever I call out one side of the market, right? If I'm gonna call out a buy here, I'm gonna look, okay, what happened at the previous high, right? So if here I'm looking at it, I'm like, we didn't stay above this high for a long time. We really just came up there, manipulated again, and then we dumped, right? So that shows potential signs of manipulation in that high. For me to go ahead and call out buys down here, I wouldn't want to do that, right? And then same thing over here, right? And then same thing over here, right? Like literally each of these highs being created, again, just like not really holding and just like coming right back down and doing huge moves to the downside. Like we're talking about massive moves. Like as soon as we make new highs here, we dropped about 700 pips, right? As soon as we made new highs here, we dropped about 430 pips, right? And then this one was like, what is that? 600 pips, right? So yeah, again, if this ends up being the mitigation phase for this, right, then we could end up seeing price actually, break this previous low that happened last week and then continue to push to the downside, which is what it looks like right now, right? If this truly is an internal sweep on liquidity, then we most likely will see that next impulse to the downside, which is why I was telling you guys, I think we could potentially see this down here at 21,450, to see us at least hit there, right? So we can also kind of see like these are big lows here, right? Like all these, right? So that could end up being our liquidity. Even if we do buy, this is like our next real nice reaccumulation. But yeah, like if we dump, I mean, can we just get to this gap? Like this gap has just been bothering me. So we'll see when we can get there. So yeah, that's that, guys. That's pretty much all I wanted to go over with you guys. That was really the main focus for today's trading session. Nasdaq and dollar. We're starting to see Nasdaq take another dumper. That's good. So my plan with this, guys, by the way, is I want to hold this just to see like if it can end up being a precursor to FOMC. Sometimes we do end up having the tops and the bottoms being created during FOMC, and then sometimes FOMC can create mitigation phases, right? Or it can just really just continue the continuation. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But regardless, it's a win in the books, and stops at break even, as well. So yeah, guys, much love, much appreciation. I'll catch you guys on the next daily update. Peace out.